After watching the videos in this module and, of course, reading the prompt, I've been thinking a lot about how these different puppetry styles build on what we've already explored this semester, especially ideas around physicality, character, and control. So I'm going to be responding to the 3 questions directly, but also I'll try and keep tying it back to those earlier foundations that we've built. In terms of similarities and differences between moving mouth hand puppets and traditional glove puppets, both forms of puppets share a lot in terms of how they sit on the performer's hand and how they rely on physical rhythm, gesture, and intention to convey character. That's something we've talked about before, about how the life of the puppet depends on timing and breath and posture, which comes from the puppeteer themselves. It comes from us. And I think what's really important to note here is that when you're stripping away the physical puppet, the glove puppet, or the moving mouth puppet, that fabric that's covering in the hand, you're left with hand pantomime, which is still puppetry. And when you have this raw hand, this bare hand, you're still able to create life out of it. You can turn it into a person, an animal, or simply an idea. And that's really the foundation of a puppet. One production that really stood out to me was the Raymond Crow production with the lip sync, specifically this one particular scene where this is combining so many different forms of puppetry in one. It's hand puppetry, it's shadow puppetry, but then it can also be moving mouth puppetry at times. It's about to come on the screen. And that's just so fascinating how all these different forms of puppetry can come together and they're all one, and there's so many ways that they're alike and different. And this is just one example of how they can be combined into one. But when it comes to differences, glove puppets, like the ones we've seen in earlier modules, often have simpler faces and no moving mouths. Their performance leans heavily on exaggerated body movements and stylistic rhythm, which gives them a more abstract or symbolic quality. In contrast, moving mouth hand puppets, like the ones in this module's videos, are more speech-focused. Their design allows for realistic or semi-realistic lip sync, which makes them more suitable for direct dialogue. That shifts the puppeteer's job. Now the hands are not just about motion, but about precise articulation, matching sound to movement. It's a different type of challenge, and there's more emphasis on facial expressions, which isn't as prominent in traditional glove puppets. Glove puppets also allow for a bit more ambiguity in terms of the character or what the puppet is supposed to represent. For example, we had 2 assignments, one being an anything puppet, and then the other one being a more thought-through character. And both can be extremely effective in conveying an idea and performing an interesting and meaningful scene. Alright, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and first consider how the performer's own bodies are being considered in these moving mouth hand puppetry videos. In some of the videos, the puppeteer or puppeteers are not visible at all. In other performances, they are visible, but they don't contribute to the piece. And then in other performances, the performer, the puppeteer, is actively participating in the performance. And there's different levels to the active participation. Some performances require the puppeteer to physically walk around. Some puppeteers match their facial expressions to what is occurring in the performance. Some of the puppeteers are dressed in costumes and are visible, but as a puppet themselves. And then others, you can't see them at all, or they're there, but they're not present in the same way as a puppeteer that is adding to the full meaning behind the piece. And I did jump around a bit just to tie this back to the first question, comparing different types of hand puppetry, because a lot of times from looking at all these different examples of these different performances with various hand puppetry types and even puppetry types in general, including shadow puppets, the puppeteer themselves has a broad range of how much they can and do interact in the performance just based on tradition and the ideas that they're trying to convey to the audience. Now, going back to the focus of this module being moving mouth hand puppets, and looking into the similarities and differences between moving mouth puppets in these featured videos. All moving mouth puppets in the videos have one goal in common, that's to animate the face, especially the mouth, in a way that supports speech, but there's a surprising variety in how they're done, and the way that they are animated, or that their mouth is animated, further emphasizes their character and their personality. Most of the puppets that we saw are fairly intricate, however, we can recognize that similar to glove puppets, a moving mouth puppet can still be fairly simple and exaggerate a moving mouth in a way that emphasizes dialogue or speech in a performance. Most of the puppets in the video examples seem to be operated by one person, or at least one person having the control over the mouth, but depending on the specific puppet and the specific character, a lot of them seem to have moving arms and rods attached to these arms, which other puppeteers can also help to create the performance, or one singular puppeteer may be able to move the mouth as well as the arms. One of the examples of a moving mouth puppet we saw was genuinely only a head and a little bit of a neck. Another one seemed to be a head to the waist-ish and showed both arms and hands, and then there were other examples that showed the full body, including the legs. What I noticed is the complexity of the puppet often reflects the demands of the character or the scene. A simpler puppet might be perfect for something more comical or casual, while a more complex one can convey nuanced emotion or physical realism. Another difference is material. Some seem to be much more plush and soft, and this tends to give a lighter, friendlier feel, while others have sharper silhouettes, maybe more toned down colors, and that suggests a stronger or more serious personality and overall tone to the performance. This connects back to how we learned about how forms support character, and even small visual choices can suggest a puppet's attitude. So overall, I found this module really helped me understand and appreciate the many layers involved in something that might seem simple or as simple as just one singular puppet. There's so many different styles to puppetry, but the same core principles apply. Intentionality, rhythm, and connection between performer and puppet all make up the performance and the puppet itself.